Let's look at a really unique Bible just sent to me. Hello, everyone. Today we're looking at a rather unique Bible I received in the mail from friend of the channel, Robert. We had an exchange recently. I had stumbled upon a Bible that he had been looking for and was able to connect with him and get that Bible to him. Was pleased to be able to do that, as it cost me nearly nothing. And in return, he said he would be sending me something that was pretty unique, and indeed it is. I opened up the package with some anticipation and was very pleased to see something I had never even heard of before, and it's unique in a few different ways. So what we have here is the Instant Reference Bible, and more on that in a moment. It was a Bible I've not heard of. And this is in big silver letters here, this is the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Bible. And we'll see why it's called that also as we open it. First of all, it appears to be, I'm guessing this is a synthetic cover of some sort. I don't know if you can make it out in the light that I have available, but it has a grain to it. So it's likely a synthetic leather, but feels very nice. It's a nice and relatively flexible. Feels nice in the hand. You can see it kind of crackles like real leather. It's got silver gilt around the edges. Doesn't appear to be art gilt, but silver gilding there. It has one, looks like a dark navy ribbon. And it comes in the King James Version. There's some information here in the back. The back? Somewhere I found where it indicates it was printed in a print run of 5,000, which I don't know if that means there were 5,000 total printed. I don't know if it's going to focus on that. There we go. Quantity 5,000. Printed in Belarus. Got paper liner here. This book appears to be, it's got head and tail bands, but I believe it's a glued binding based on the way it kind of performs as you're opening it up. I did take some time to slowly kind of break it in and go through page by page, separating them. They were rather stuck together, which tells you it's a brand new Bible. Although it was printed, I think, in 2016, so still relatively new. Editor Leroy Martin, Pentecostal Theological Seminary in Cleveland, Tennessee. Published by Assurance Publications. Do we have an ISBN? I'm not certain we do. I didn't come across one. So let's see, first of all, what makes this a Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Bible. We have these blank pages at the beginning, but then there's a color section. It looks like a photo reproductions. I mean, there's lots of photographs, but the actual text itself even seems to be photo reproduction of the 1963 speech of Martin Luther King Jr. in D.C., the I Have a Dream speech. There's a little biographical page here. August 28, 1963, King organized a peaceful march on Washington, D.C. that drew over 250,000 people. It was there on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial that King delivered his speech, I Have a Dream. And so we have the text of the speech reproduced here, along with some photographs from the life of MLK. There he is with LBJ. He's giving a speech. Various other photographs from his life. his work in the civil rights movement. Signing of the Civil Rights Act. Then we have some, again, photocopied, it looks like, hymns. This Lift Every Voice and Sing came to some fame and or infamy recently with the NFL, if you recall that a few years back. I don't remember when that was or what the hubbub was about, but it involved the song somehow, which looks like a lovely song. Not super familiar with it. We have a presentation page. Have a introduction to what makes up the Instant Study Bible. So let's look at that. Let's look at that a little closer. So we've got, okay, first the non-obvious part. In the text, there are underlined words that are defined at the end of the verse, which is handy. You don't have to go to a glossary or something in the back. But what makes it the Instant Reference Bible is kind of a fascinating idea. I can see why it didn't catch on because of some inherent limitations. But where most Bibles would have a reference in the margin, inner or outer margin, or at the bottom in kind of footnotes, this, rather than giving you the reference, prints the referred to verse in a different font in italics, or I guess that's italics, directly under the verse. So rather than having a reference, it actually prints out the verse and tells you the reference of the verse. But that's kind of a clever idea. Now, it necessarily limits the number of references you can have because it would make this book very unwieldy, which, by the way, not a huge book. I didn't cover that. Let me do that really quick. It's like, 9 3/8 and 6 inches. It's not overly thick. 1.5 inches thick. It is not line matched. It uses a huge percentage of the page. There's not margins anywhere to make notes. It wasn't clearly intended for that purpose. Also, something odd that I find odd, at the top of the page, it simply has the book name. It doesn't give you the, what chapter, certainly not chapter and verse, but you just don't know where you are in the book of Jeremiah. You have to kind of search a little bit to find your reference. That was an odd editorial choice. Books, you can see, do not start on their own page. They just one continuous line of text. But the print is outstandingly big. And even though it's not line matched and there's some ghosting, the hugeness of the text makes it an easy to read book. How many pages are we looking at here? 1,800 pages. A lot of the references are kind of self-referential. That is, a reference that you'll find in the book of Psalms might refer to other Psalms, or the majority of the time, not all the time, not even the overwhelming majority, but the majority of the time, an Old Testament verse will have a reference to other Old Testament passages. Same with the New. It'll refer to other New. Now it does, a minority of the time, a significant minority, it will refer to the other Testament. So we'll look at, here, for instance, we're in the first letter of St. Peter, chapter 2, 11. Dearly beloved, I beseech you, as strangers and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul. And here we have the reference. For we are strangers before thee, and sojourners, as were all our fathers. Our days on the earth are as a shadow, and there is none abiding. 1 Chronicles 29:15. So here we see an interesting example of a reference from the Old Testament appended onto a New Testament passage from the letter, first letter of Peter, but also kind of demonstrates that limitation that you see in this format, in that there may be lots of other references that would be appropriate for this verse. I mean, this verse is talking about abstaining from fleshly lusts which war against the soul. seems to be the main subject of that verse. But the reference they've chosen has more to do with being strangers and pilgrims. So they're referring to this First Chronicles passage in which the writer's describing the people of Israel as strangers before thee, sojourners, as were all our fathers, etc. So you can see the built-in limitations of this format. Acts is, this is a helpful thing in the book of Acts because it refers to portions of scripture that are in letters. So it ties in what is going on in the book of Acts in the early church with events that are described in the letters of Paul and others. So here we have Crispus, the chief ruler of the synagogue, believed on the Lord with all his house, and many of the Corinthians hearing believed and were baptized. That's from the book of Acts chapter 18. And we have kind of the parallel verse in 1 Corinthians where Paul mentions, I thank God that I baptized none of you but Crispus and Gaius. So just kind of confirmation of the veracity of this story here told by Luke in writing the book of Acts. Just kind of confirmed in a letter likely written before the book of Acts was compiled by Paul to the church in Corinth. Well, a neat idea. You can see this is a red letter edition, and the red is very bright red. Neat idea. This bookmark was in it. I don't know if that came with the Bible or if Robert stuck that in there. So each page has, 2 or 3, 4 at the most, really, references. Maybe 5, but a handful of references. But they have, in each of them, they have the passage actually printed. I think it's a genius idea that if you accept the built-in limitations, it's kind of cool. What else do we have? So at the beginning, we had the information about Martin Luther King Jr., and that's what makes it a memorial Bible. Not a super big fan of this giant title here on the front of my Bible. It seems like an odd design choice, but I'm sure it was attractive to certain buyers of Bibles that maybe they wouldn't have bought it otherwise. So in that case, I can give it a thumbs up. I just wouldn't have chosen to do it that way. In the back, there's some really interesting stuff here in the back. Stuff I've never seen before. We do have a sort of a concordance, an abridged concordance here, index, subject index, I guess they call it. Then we have this section I've never seen before, but apparently you can get this as a book or in another book. The Chronology of the Bible by Frank Klassen. I think I've never heard of, somebody I've never heard of. And this, again, looks like it was photographically reproduced for this edition. And it's quite a few pages. What is that, 60, 63, 64 pages on this glossy paper. And it goes through the chronology of the Bible. And it is not ashamed of biblical authority and the accuracy of the chronology as outlined in the Bible. It's fully illustrated and all that. It has interesting charts and maps and whatnot. It's kind of a neat thing. I'd kind of like to get this as a freestanding book. See if it's a little bigger and maybe easier to read because this print gets pretty tiny. But it shows its bravery right at the beginning. When we start off with God creating the heavens and the earth, etc. But let's look at the timeline here. So we have this timeline, and it's reproduced throughout. I mean, it's another timeline on each page, as it were. We've got the date, 3975, and not just 3975, but Adam created Friday, April 1st, 3975 BC. That is something, I mean, maybe that's a common thing. I've not I've not known there was a specific day and month and year assigned to the, that anyone had kind of parsed it out to that extent where that was believed to be the actual date. I think that's fascinating, but um, I don't know where that comes from. Maybe some of you all do, but kind of a neat thing appended here to the back. This is probably the most interesting part of the Bible. The concept of the references in the text itself is really neat, but this is really interesting and unusual, and I'd kind of like to have this as a freestanding book. Spend a little time going through that, which I won't do in this video. Really cool. So yeah, really unique Bible. Never heard of it. Never heard of the Instant Reference Bible, and you can get those not in a Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Edition. The Instant Reference Bible exists apart from that, so that is its own thing. But you combine that with the uniqueness of this presumably limited edition Martin Luther King Memorial Bible. That is something I can't imagine ever just stumbling upon. So that is really cool, Robert. Thanks for finding that, sending that my way so I could take a look at it and share it with you all. If you found that interesting, there's, you can probably still find copies of this. This was brand spanking new, still in shrink wrap, unless Robert put it in that, in which case he did a bang up job on packaging. But cool Bible, awesome idea with some really neat additions to it at both ends. I give it a thumbs up. Pretty cool. If you are so inclined, if you're a big fan of Martin Luther King Jr., if you have some connection to the civil rights movement that would inspire you to seek out something like this, great. If you just like the concept of the instant reference, it's worth it for that also, and for this additional material on the back. Thanks for sticking with me for this review of the Instant Reference Bible, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Bible, King James Version. Hope to see you here again next time.